Hello and welcome to another edition of Beyond the Headlines. I am Ryan Gilchrest, Managing Editor with Post and Courier Greenville. Appreciate you joining us today. Hopefully Nate and I have all our audio and visual issues straightened out this morning, but if we stumble a little bit with the technical side, please bear with us. We're going to be talking today about a major project that's beginning to develop on the north side, north of the city of Greenville in Greenville County, in the San Souci area. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. Before we get started, I want to introduce Nathaniel Cary. He's a reporter covering Greenville County. That also means largely he covers a lot of development. Welcome, Nate.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So let's dive into it here in just a second. First, I want to throw in a little plug for the Post and Courier right here up top. I know a lot of you on this call are subscribers, particularly those of you who subscribe to our newsletters. We really appreciate that so much. I'll bring a little more information later in this discussion about maybe more you can do to get more of our content, but we'll save that until after we've talked about today's topic. So the former Union Bleachery property in the San Souci area of Greenville County, which is near the intersection of Old Buncombe Road and West Blue Ridge Drive, for those of you who are more familiar with the road intersections, represents about 250 acres of land. It's not far beyond the city limits. It's relatively close to downtown. It's situated close to the Swamp Rabbit Trail, which makes it a sort of particularly interesting property. The caveat, the asterisk with it, is until recently, the entire 250 acres was listed with the Environmental Protection Agency as a Superfund site. Recently, a large portion of the property was delisted, but there is still a significant portion that remains a Superfund site. It's complicated development. There's a lot going on with it. There's a county vote coming up on it next week. So we're going to talk about all of that today. Nate, let me start with you, and let's just hit the basics first. Where does the property stand with the EPA, and what exactly does it mean to be a Superfund site?
I'll tackle the second part of that question first, and then talk about where it stands on this specific property. The Superfund sites came about after a number of massive and highly national topics that became newsworthy in the 1970s with environmental disasters and particularly toxic or chemical waste sites or dump sites, old manufacturing sites that were leaching chemicals into the groundwater, into the soil nearby. So Congress enacted legislation that allowed the EPA to come in and have a program to clean these sites up from the immediate issues, monitor them long term, eventually the goal being to return them to some sort of a use if possible, and if the health risks are negligible. So that started in the 1970s, this specific site, and that became known as a Superfund. There's thousands of them across the country, and they are listed on EPA's website. EPA's got a whole program that they'll go in and monitor and clean up and propose action plans to clean them up. And the Union Bleachery site, all 250 some odd acres of it, was listed as a Superfund site on the EPA's website. And under its national priorities list, which is the list of its priorities that it wants to get, projects that it wants to get cleaned up and finished, and hopefully returned to use. So this property specifically, part of it is still listed as a Superfund site, about 40 acres, right around an old former mill in that immediate vicinity. And then there's another 2/3 of this property, 200 acres or so, that has recently, that was listed as a Superfund. EPA split it into categories and then delisted recently these two outer sections of this property at Old Buncombe Road and West Blue Ridge Drive. So there needs to clean up a Superfund site. There's a years long process of creating a plan, investigating, figuring out exactly what is there, what chemicals are there, what's in the groundwater, what's in the soil, what potential health risks or hazards are there, proposing an action plan, some whether it's leave it there, don't touch it, or you can do these activities on top of it, avoid the water, whatever the action plan is, remove, even removing soil, carting it off to a specific landfill. There's all sorts of different actions that can be taken. So they'll develop an action plan or proposed course of action. They'll get feedback from the community for a specific number of period of time, and then they'll put that action plan into place, or issue what they call a record of decision, and eventually potentially can delist the property as a Superfund. So that's where this kind of the background and where this property stands right now.
Yeah, I know even the developer has described this before as a decades long project. Let's talk quickly before we get into some of the others about the portion of the property that still is listed as a Superfund site. What is the specific issue in that area? I believe chromium was one of the larger things, but I know there are others. What part of the property is that, and what is the remaining major issue there?
That part of the property is where the former Union Bleachery, also known as Cone Mills, or the last owners of it was American Fast Print, that operated out of that mill starting in 1903, and it operated and stayed in operation until 2003 when a massive fire destroyed part of the mill and sent American Fast Print eventually into bankruptcy. So there's a large property around it that is, a lot of it is wooded. It's bordered by Langston Creek and the Reedy River. So there's waterways involved, and there's also a reservoir, a couple of reservoirs involved as well. And the larger piece of property on the outskirts of the property, where much of the forested area is and vacant land, has been delisted. The immediate section around and including the mill, where there's still some brick structure that's standing, smokestacks that are standing, some other smaller buildings that are also still there. About 40 acres that still remains on the EPA's Superfund list. And so the EPA, the issues with it date back decades. And the companies used to use part of the basement to store chemicals that were used in their manufacturing processes and textile processes. That flooded in the 1970s. So that may have led to some of the leaching into the groundwater. There's chemicals that were pumped from the mill site to a reservoir, and that entire line is known as a chromium line in the EPA paperwork and maps, where there may be metals that are in the groundwater and in the soil in that area. And that's the section that's most, I guess, of concern that they're still investigating and monitoring. The EPA found in those outer areas, they did all of the monitoring, they did all of the testing, everything met within the allowable limits or health risks for cancer, for different health risks, or for potential of somebody trespassing and swimming in a river. They have to monitor or calculate for each of these activities, like what's the worst thing if a child digs in the soil and eats it. What are the potential health risks? Potential of them coming into contact with something that could cause cancer. And they monitor for all of that and come up with a risk number, basically a risk factor, and it met all of those. So their record of decision, issued just this last year, basically said, do nothing, just leave that as it is. Don't disturb the groundwater, the soil underneath, and you'll be okay.
Shifting gears a little bit, you've spoken with the developer that hopes to do this project a few times. Who is he? What's his background? What brought him to this project?
The name of the group is Cone Mills Acquisition Group. That's how they're registered in South Carolina. There's two primary principals involved, Dean Warhaft and Warren Zinn. Each of them have a lot of prior development experience. They're both based out of Florida, I believe the Miami, Florida area. And I know Dean Warhaft in particular had worked previously for a development company that had done a number of projects that he oversaw, dealing with the EPA, dealing with Superfund or brownfield sites. So he's mentioned to me that the experience that he's had in the past, specifically dealing with the EPA, and which is a government agency. So there's a lot of differences and difficulties involved rather than just purchasing a site and developing it. There's a lot more involved in that process, which is one of the things that has made this such a difficult property to redevelop. It's sat vacant and empty for decades now. There have been developers come in and attempt and look at it and start the process to redevelop it, and have all passed on it. So this is in a sense the latest attempt, but it's also from my understanding the furthest along in the process and continuing to move forward.
So we'll get to some more of those details, particularly in terms of the effort as it relates to the county. But let's talk a little more about the planned or proposed project first. It's a multi-stage plan. As I mentioned before, they've talked in terms of decades before, but obviously it's not the sort of thing where you wait decades and then something appears. What's in this first stage? What are they hoping to accomplish? I assume entirely on the delisted portion of the property.
Right. So part of the proposal when it was brought to the county, it was one massive 250 acre planned development. So that gives a plan up front of here's how we want this to look when it's done. So the county can feel most comfortable with it, the county officials, by knowing exactly what they're going to get in the end. And if there's any major changes to the plan, that has to come back to them to review and any changes. The developer gets the ability to develop some of these sites and build them out over time. And because of the part of the portion of it being delisted, he's able to start on those in those areas. And he can start to build out in those areas. So this company is in the process of designing, engineering those proposals. There's already a plan in place. It includes a huge mix of retail, restaurants, grocery stores, a large scale area for manufacturing or industrial use. Has been mentioned to me that there's discussion with potentially like a bio type of a company, and that a large scale company could locate their headquarters or something like that. Then there's other smaller office spaces, and a mix of uses basically throughout, as well as living and housing, apartment complexes, townhouses, condo buildings, no single family housing, which was intentionally proposed by the developer because he didn't want, even though it was cleared by the EPA that the ground, the soil is safe, it meets the health risks. If you don't have single family housing, then you don't have people digging gardens and stuff like that as well. So it just limits those uses, which was done by the developer on purpose, that he could have proposed those uses but chose not to. So this entire plan is in place. It's already been approved. Now we're at a stage of seeking special source tax credits from tax incentives, essentially, to move forward with the project. And then it will close and hopefully begin the development process.
Since you mentioned the tax credits, let's go ahead and go to that. I do want to come back to a few other topics related to the property itself, but it seems like a good time to touch on what the county is offering. Obviously, with a property this size and where it's located, it's something the county would very much like to be adding to the tax rolls as opposed to sitting unused as an EPA Superfund site. The story you wrote recently mentioned something along the lines of $200 million of investment wrapped up in this. Give us the details on what the county's offering, what the incentives entail, what the developer has to do from this, and in what way the public investment is protected.
Sure. So frequently when a county or a city is trying to court new development or something that's going to bring jobs to the area, they'll offer some sort of an incentive package to help that company to move here, or to, in this case, develop a massive unused piece of property that's got all sorts of challenges involved in the development process, with an uncertain timeline of when they'll be able to develop the entirety of the property. So in this case, the county has offered and come to an agreement with this company, Cone Mills Acquisition Group, on what's called special source tax credits as one part of this agreement, and that allows the company to make payments to a specific amount in payments in lieu of taxes to the county. The county in turn will use those payments to perform work on sewer, on infrastructure, sidewalks, public spaces, and will invest back into that property and the public aspects of that property to make it make the numbers work, essentially, especially on the front end of a site like this, where there's going to be a significant amount of investment before there's ever a return recouped on it by a potential developer. So that's all part of this. Now, the way that it's been structured, they will require eventually, over 20 years, a $200 million investment in the site, but it's in stages. So within 5 years, $50 million investment, and then at 10 years there's a milestone, 15 years and 20 years milestone, and the county will invest and will reinvest as each of those stages is met. So if all of this, if everything's rapidly done, they can reinvest that money back into the property quicker. If for whatever reason EPA hangups or just slower to develop than expected, they've got up to 20 years to make that full investment. The developer said that's the minimum, 200 million. There's going to be much more. That's his quote, much more investment in this property. If everything goes through and the EPA releases the rest of it from the Superfund status. As well as the special source tax credits, there's also it's been placed into a multi-county industrial park, which is a fancy term that basically allows the state to recognize this property, the county to recognize this property, agencies within the county or can market this property to potential industrial or manufacturing or bio companies to locate there as part of the county's industrial framework, basically. So it has a much better status to be able to court jobs to that region as well.
It's coming back before council on Tuesday, correct?
It is. It's had a public hearing this last week, and it's coming back for final reading on Tuesday by county council.
So, having been out to the property, and I know you have too, I would guess most people who've driven past it either haven't even been able to see what's there, or really don't even understand. It's especially the old factory site is fenced in. There's a lot of trees and brush growing up in front of it. It's obviously locked because it's restricted. most people aren't familiar really with this property other than probably one of two ways, either driving past it on Old Buncombe or on West Blue Ridge Drive, or more likely going past it on the Swamp Rabbit Trail heading north out of town. That intersection there, that highway there, West Blue Ridge Drive, Highway 253, there's a Swamp Rabbit Trail crossing there that's had some discussion about it before. I think it would be fair to say it's considered dangerous. I know certainly I've felt a little iffy running across a 4-lane highway. And I know a couple of different solutions have been proposed. One that's actually being worked on and another that requires dominion. Can you tell us a little bit about how this project might impact that particular crossing?
Sure. So the significance of the location of this project is, and people may also recognize this because 400,000 to 500,000 people a year use that Swamp Rabbit Trail, which runs right next to this property. So there's a significant aspect of this that involves the trail, and the location being 5 lanes of West Blue Ridge Drive that you have to cross. And in the past, it is considered a dangerous intersection. The county has looked into building a bridge, pedestrian bridge over West Blue Ridge Drive. They've never been able to do it because there are Duke Energy power transmission lines that also run over that section, and that they would have to. A bridge would put people too close to those lines to make it safe. So the county has talked about doing a stop sign, stop light at that location as well, but that's been rejected by a number of county leaders because it's a highway and traffic's moving at 45 miles an hour. Putting a stoplight there is no guarantee for pedestrian safety. Is the way that County Council Chairman Willis Meadows, who represents that area, has put it to me. So there's debate about that. So as an alternative, there's been some money, about $80,000 invested in turning a culvert underneath that roadway near where the Swamp Rabbit Trail currently goes, turning that into a temporary tunnel for the Swamp Rabbit Trail. And that project is in the works, not complete yet, and still needing some approval and a decent amount of work done, but could be done within a year to 18 months and open. A second aspect of this is the developer wants to build that pedestrian bridge. He has asked the county as part of this tax incentive plan for permission to build a pedestrian bridge, which for him it's a benefit because it will highlight his project, and he can turn it into a beautiful section there that photographs well, and it's right at the front of his property, and can take in the project itself. He's given it a name on the trail, so they're trying to take advantage of the Swamp Rabbit Trail. This gives him permission from the county. He still has to work with Duke Energy to pay to move those lines. Has to work with Renewable Water Resources to pay to move sewer lines that are underneath it. So there's a lot of work that's still and uncertainty still with building a pedestrian bridge. That's the eventual goal. That's maybe the 5-year, 10-year goal. The immediate goal is to get a tunnel, at least temporarily, to keep foot traffic from having to cross 5 lanes of highway in that area. And that's underway right now.
Right. Well, I think anybody who's been down there and sort of walked around it will tell you that it's certainly the passageway underneath the road is a better solution. I think we all understand how the river works as well.
Yeah.
When I saw it the first time, it was the area that they're going to have people pass through was filled with sand. It's the natural product of the river going up and down. So certainly there's some flooding issues there. So it sounds like everybody agrees the bridge long-term is the solution. It just comes with the most problems.
Right. So yeah, they mentioned the flooding issues. There's also recognition that at times they're going to have to close this tunnel because there will be occasions when the river's going to flood, when the tunnel's going to have some water in it. As they're giving the approvals for this, they're talking about an emergency button in case somebody gets trapped in there for some reason, lighting in the tunnel. So there's safety aspects that have to be taken into effect as well.
Right. Okay, well, we'll definitely keep an eye on that. We had one question that came in. It kind of sparks an interesting idea, and I think does kind of tie into not even just this project, but probably several of the projects are sort of connected to old mills and sort of the water tower area, which is thinking of these redevelopments in terms like the old textile communities, right? Like something more like a village that offers a little bit of everything. This project definitely falls sort of into that category, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really does harken back to that old mill village concept of, you've got the place where everybody works and congregates, and then they build out all of the framework around it. You've got the churches and the grocery stores and the ball fields and the housing all surrounding it. And I think this does create the kind of that live work community. There's been a lot of attempts at that, not all of them successful. There's a few that are ongoing now in Greenville County that kind of work in that same way. I think this would be the largest, and certainly the largest that's this close to downtown Greenville. With the center of this project would be about 3 miles from downtown Greenville. But it would have the office space, it would have the retail and the restaurants and the grocery stores and outdoor, livable spaces as well. Amphitheater that's proposed near the Reedy River, and about 50 acres that's set aside as green space around this project, including 10 miles that's been proposed for further development of the Swamp Rabbit Trail or trail network through and around this project that eventually could be turned over into a public Swamp Rabbit Trail system.
Assuming county council passes these incentives, and there's no reason to think they won't. I believe the last vote was unanimous. So, assuming come Tuesday, the next vote is unanimous or certainly enough to move it on, what happens next?
The next step, the developer, so when American Fast Print, the last company that owned this property, went bankrupt, SC, Department of Health and Environmental Controls, essentially became the owners of this property, the receivers of this property, and they've been in charge of it since 2011, I believe it is. And so they still have this property under their control. The developer needs to close on that purchase, that the property itself is kind of the next step. Now they've been in discussion for quite some time. The developers actually, even the last couple of weeks, they've been out there with engineers and also taking over some of the monitoring of the site as well. So they'll take over a lot of that work and do that work with oversight from SCDHEC and the EPA, and that will be ongoing. But that will also allow the developer, once he's got the property in hand, to begin the process of developing it, and he hopes to break ground before the end of the year on at least some part of this project. So we got a 20-30 year build out, but we're getting started now, and then it's going to be quite some time to see the finished product.
We had one question just pop in, and I don't know if you can answer it, but we'll certainly throw it out there to you. Got a reader who noticed a voluntarily cleanup sign this morning out there.
Mm-hmm.
They live out that way. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's part of taking this over from SEDX control and taking over I talked about he's going to take over the monitoring, the development company, take over the monitoring, taking over those aspects of it with oversight from the state. And that's what that sign is detailing.
Okay, so that's part of the process. We're out of time, Nate, but I'm going to break one of my cardinal rules and ask you two other quick things that you can just answer quickly, just kind of give folks an idea of where things stand. We've talked a lot about County Square redevelopment before. Where do things stand with that right now? I think anybody who's driven by it has seen the towers going up.
Yeah, so the two towers have topped out essentially, and they're still under construction. And that is on schedule to be finished by sometime first quarter of 2023. Assuming there's not any further delays with shipping and supplies and stuff like that. They've moved Family Court already to the county's new office locations on Halton Road, and some other offices have moved out there as well. Probably the next major thing people will see is at some point the former health department building, SEDOT buildings, they'll be taken down on University Ridge. But first quarter of 2023 is when they expect the administration building to be opened. Then they'll have the process of moving everybody in there, and then the process of taking down the existing county square.
And earlier this week, you were at another rezoning hearing. For those of you who start to go to sleep every time you hear the word zoning or rezoning, I think they can probably tell you they are regularly some of the more interesting meetings that happen given the variety of issues. Can you just kind of describe sort of the overall sense of what's going on? I know there were a lot of projects dealt with. We're seeing certainly some pushback against increasing density in certain areas. Just kind of give us a flavor of what it's like.
Yeah, sometimes to me it feels like it's just wearing down the residents who traditionally are coming into these and protesting for traffic or for whatever the reason is that they're concerned, density, location, things like that. And some of them, especially this last meeting, there were several projects that were coming for a second time. They'd already been rejected once, and they can come back if they have proposed something with a lower density than before. So then residents are returning to discuss those again. And then just the sheer number of projects that are going on that we had in 2021, the most rezoning requests in at least 20 years in Greenville County. Not all of those were successful, but that were all on the calendar, on the docket. And we started off as of this week, they had 15 requests that were on the docket to start the year. And that's anywhere from 200 and something apartments proposed on Frady Drive and Old Bramlett Road near the Saluda River. There's projects that were proposed along in Woodruff Road that drew, Five Forks area that drew attention for residential development there, as well as in rural Simpsonville between Fort Charles Road and Old Standing Springs Road. So they're various. They're all over the county. They're continuous. It's just more and more, and we're seeing the developers trying to provide housing for the number of residents that are moving here and expected to move here in the coming decade and a half to 2 decades. By 2040, expecting at least 200,000 new residents in Greenville County, and with shortage of housing already, supply is going to become even more of an issue. So we're going to continue to see requests like this and more meetings like this. I think this one lasted just over 3 hours the other night.
Yeah, standing room only 3-hour meeting.
Yeah.
Folks, if you wonder what reporters get paid to do, it's not that they get paid to write stories. It's they get paid to go to all the things that are required in order to write the stories. Most of our time is spent, gathering things like that. Nate, thanks for doing that for us. We have one last question come in asking about a theater on the project. I think I can answer that one just from the renderings. There is sort of an amphitheater. So for question we had come in, yes, it would be more focused on live music and events as opposed to a performing arts venue.
Yeah, and small scale. We're not talking the size of like the Heritage Park Amphitheater in Simpsonville. We're talking closer to the theater in the round that's in Falls Park, like a smaller venue.
Right, right. So obviously, we use the word proposed and planned and all sorts of things. There's a lot of things with this project that will certainly or could possibly change. There are a lot of other large projects going on in Greenville County as well. We'll probably be back to update this and some of the others sometime in the next few months, as they do tend to change fairly rapidly. For now, though, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you tuning in. I hope this brought you some new information. Thank you for watching. We'll post this on our website in case you want to watch it again, or you want to share it with a friend. You can find it here relatively shortly at postandcourier.com/beyond-the-headlines, or you can just search Post and Courier Beyond the Headlines. You can support our work by signing up for any of our free newsletters. I mentioned those earlier. postandcourier.com/Greenville/newsletter-sign-up. I know a lot of you on this are already signed up for various newsletters, and we appreciate that. We're always looking to do more, so if you have ideas, let me know. Paid subscribers make our brand of journalism possible and help us keep our communities informed. It's absolutely essential to everything we do that you consider a subscription to the Post and Courier. You can find out more at postandcourier.com/Greenville/subscribe. Do check that out. On behalf of Nate, the entire Post and Courier team, thank you so much for your time, and we'll be back again probably sometime in February. Have a great day.